Hey, Bass Geek here, and today I'm going to show you how I save money online when spooling my spinning reels. Alright guys, so I'm going to show you how I use Braid to fluorocarbon to save me money on my spinning reels. Now, most of the spinning reels that I use, I like, 2500 series is about as small as I go, but I'm a big 3000 to 3500 series spinning reel guy. And these are the Lose Speed Spins. They're the 300, 3000 series, whichever way you want to go about it. I've got two of them, picked two of these up earlier this year at the expos along with the Halo rods. So what I generally do to save money, unlike what I do in the previous how to save money on line using braid backing on my casting reels, I actually use a cheap braid, and again, this is the same 50-pound test. I don't really care what you use on the spinning rod, or spinning reel, I should say, but these things have, pretty deep spools. So the difference between a casting spool and a spinning spool, this doesn't turn unless of course it's giving off drag. So there's no turn, so you can put 20 knots on here. Now I wouldn't suggest putting 20 knots in here because the line's going to catch. But remember what we're doing. We're going to put some cheap braid, and this is just some cheap mustad braid that I got from Walmart. We're going to put that cheap braid on there just to take up space. It's just a filler. It's like rolls that they give you when you go out to a restaurant. It's just to fill you up before the main course comes. Same thing here. Why don't I just put all the braid on there? Well, this reel actually holds, for 8-pound test, 210 yards. This braid is actually smaller than this 8-pound Red Label Fluorocarbon. It's a smaller diameter. So I can put this 150 yards, which I don't remember what I paid for it, but this stuff isn't cheap, even though it is Bass Pro Shops. And this thing would eat the entire spool and leave about a quarter of the spool to be filled. I don't want to fill a quarter of that spool with this. So let's go ahead and let's put us some cheap braid. Again, whatever cheap braid, the cheapest braid you can find. I know, again, in a video that Tackle Junkie just did, he found a really good deal, I believe, on Amazon for some Piscafun braid, a big spool of it that he said roughly would feel like 22 reels. So you might want to go check his video out again and check that out. But the deal is, like I said, I've got a ton of this. I found it up at Walmart, so I just picked some up, and that's what I'm going to use. But what I generally do is I take this and I fill it about a quarter of the way up, a little more, quarter to half, because again, guys, I don't plan on a fish spooling me. Even though we're talking about, using spinning rods, spinning reels, I don't think I'm going to get a hold of anything that's going to be big enough that's going to literally take over half of my spool before I fight them back to the boat. And you guys have seen me catch 5-pound smallmouth on 6-pound test line. That was done exactly this way, and I never even got to the braid, and I had probably 2 casts worth of fluorocarbon. So here's what we're going to do. The very first thing that you need to make sure that you're doing is when you pick up your spool, okay? Most reels, when you reel, they're going to go clockwise, okay? I want my spool of line to come off counterclockwise. So it should be facing me, and it should go counterclockwise off the spool. That will cut down on loops tremendously for it. Just remember, whatever the reel does, you want to do opposite with the spool of line. So let's get to the knot. Okay, so the first thing is at least run it through the first eye, so the big eye, and then you're going to want to run it down to your spool. You're going to pop that bell open, and then you're just going to tie an arbor knot. Really, you can tie whatever knot you want here. It really does not matter. So after you get your arbor knot tied, you want to go ahead and clip off as much line as you can. And then, as always, for me, what I do is I go ahead and lay this over. Then, as always, we make sure we get it going the right direction, get it laying in there, and we just put a small little tab of black tape over top of it. Alright, so the first thing you want to do when you start the spool, you want to grab it between two fingers, holding the rod up here. So while holding the line between your fingers and hold resistance, you want this line to go on good and tight. If you don't hold the line tight between your fingers, it'll cinch down into itself, which will cause problems. Now, as you can see, the line is coming off in a counterclockwise manner. It's always easier if you've got somebody else to hold it. But what we're going to do is we're going to put about half of the spool on, and you can see it's coming off nice and easy. So you can see now we've got about half this spool filled. So let's go ahead and cut our line, and we're going to start putting our good braid on now. Now guys, here's a good example of why you have to pay attention. You can see this mustad braid comes off counterclockwise. Now, when I went to pick up my hyper braid, we'll notice that if I had it around backwards, so not turning the spool around backwards. I know there's a lot of people that say always put it upside down, but look, it comes off clockwise, which will give you loops. Now, I know it's not as bad with braid as it is with like fluorocarbon or monofilament, but pay attention. Notice this is spooled completely different than this. So what we're going to do is we're going to just turn it around, and we're going to set this face up. Alright, so I know there's a ton of videos out here. You might not be able to see this, but again, my favorite knot is a uni to uni. Again, we're not going to get to this. You could tie a simple overhand knot and be fine. I like the uni to uni knot, and that's what I'm going to tie. And basically what we do, we take and hold both lines limp. We put them together, pinch them in the middle. I'm not going to tie a lot of loops. I'm literally going to put 3 turns in there. We're going to cinch that side down. Now guys, one of the keys to a uni knot, make sure they're not already twisted. Bring it back around. Make your loop again. And again, you know, if the knot is going to come through like our leader knot, I'll tie more, but this, we're just going to do it 3 or 4 times. We're going to cinch it down, and then we're going to pull them together. We'll clip our 2 tag ends, and we'll start spooling again. Again, make sure you're pinching the line between your thumb and your forefinger to put pressure on the line. We want to make sure this braid goes on as tight as we can get it. That is a key to putting braid on anything, as tight as we can get it. You'll also notice that, again, we have the spool laying down, and the line is going to come off counterclockwise. And then all we do is start spooling the line. Now guys, this time we're going to do things a little differently. We're actually going to put enough line on here so that we only use a leader. Alright guys, so as you can see, we're going to get it filled up really close to the edge of that little bevel there. And now we're going to put our fluorocarbon on. Now here's a tip I want to give you. If for some reason your line is spooling more toward the front or more toward the back, what you want to do, and what has probably happened, is you've lost one of these. So a lot of times what you have is these small little washers. And so what ends up happening, you take the spool off, one of them sticks to it, they stick to the bottom of the spool, it falls off, and all of a sudden your line is winding either to the front or to the back. Most of the time to the front, because what ends up happening is the spool now sits a little bit lower on the shaft. So what I do generally is I get me a box and I hold on to this box, and all the washers and spare parts out of my spinning rod reels, when I buy them, I keep them in here. And of course, a lot of them come with a few spare washers. Alright, so this is how I generally do my leaders. Basically, I take my spool and I go 1, 2, 3. If I want something closer to 20 foot, I'll do 4. I'm about 6 foot tall. That's going to be a little over 20 feet, and I'll just throw it out to the side. But that's how I measure out my leader. I know I'm 6 foot tall. I know this is about 5 feet, 6 feet. So I do that 3 to 4 times. 15 to 20 foot leader generally is what I run. I'll go ahead and cut it, and now I'm ready to tie it on. The good thing about a leader is I can change the length of it anytime I want. I can cut this off. Now I will give you one tip. I don't run anything lower on this lighter line, 8-pound fluorocarbon to 10-pound braid, than a 8-foot leader. When it gets down to 8 foot, I'll cut it and take it off. And the reason why I cut it and take it off is because even with this light equipment, I'm a power angler, and I tend to maybe set the hook just a little hard, and what ends up happening, that knot can't stand the shock. So, 5 feet or less, I'm cutting it off and I'm retying it. 5 to 8 feet generally, because the knot can't stand the shock. And yeah, I probably set the hook a little too hard, like I'm using a bait caster, but that's just how I am. So when it gets down to 8 feet, I'm cutting and I'm retying on a new leader. Again, guys, we're just going to tie a double uni knot. We're going to bring it over. This time I'm going to wrap it 4 times. This is light line. You don't really need to wrap it more than those 4 times. And we're going to pull it down nice and tight. Again, one of the keys to the double uni, make sure that this line is not already wrapped up. And again, we're just going to wrap it 4 more times. Maybe, if I can get a hold of it, 4 more times. And we will pull that down tight. And then we will wet it and slide it together. We'll cut the tag ends off and we'll spool it up. Alright, the great thing about measuring out the leader, you don't have to worry about which direction the spool of line is going. So we're just going to go ahead and spool it up, and voila, there we have it. Alright guys, you can see we've got it spooled up there nice and neat. We've got a 20-foot leader of fluorocarbon. We'll tie our lure on, and we're ready to go fishing. Alright, so I hope this saves you money, because good braid is not cheap. So make sure you even fill your spinning reels with some cheap braid on top of some good braid. Then, if you want to, use a leader. If you're in an area where you have to, like me, most of the lakes I fish are clear, so of course fluorocarbon is key. Now, another tip that I'm going to give you real quick, you notice that I'm not using 20-pound test. I use 10-pound braid. And the reason why I use such small braid is because I'm a co-angler. One of the things about fishing from the back of the boat, and I'm not saying cast over top your angler, but a long cast will help you get to fish that maybe otherwise you wouldn't be able to get to because of boat position. Alright guys, so if you have any other tips to add to this, as always, leave them in the comment section below. You know I love to talk fishing with you guys, so questions and comments in the comment section below. Remember what I always say, let's make this channel a knowledge swapping channel. Let's teach each other. You guys teach me, I'll show you things, and we'll all catch more fish together. So as always, like it if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe, and you guys rock.